Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is a part of the Diversity and Inclusion Inclusion Center DISC with support of NSBE and also the Career Center. So this is an important talk about diversity, voices, and life in STEM. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Zia Malangalila. I'm a sophomore studying electrical engineering. I'm from Austin. Yes. I'm from Austin, Texas, and I'm actively involved in EGWE, NSBE, and the Morale Fellowship while here at SCU. So I have the honor to introduce the special guest. He graduated from the University of Washington, Civil Engineering Award. Yes.
CE squad, yeah.
Award-winning Science Communicator, received Asteroid Award for Best Streaming Content, People of Change First Community and Outreach Efforts, entrepreneur and founder of Jada Brands, making it all the way to Shark Tank. His passion for science and entertainment, along with curiosity for new innovation, has turned him into a credible life journey. It's my pleasure to welcome Maynard Okereke, Hip Hop M.D.
Yes, hello. Pleasure to meet everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. This is a good squad here. You guys doing good? Good? Okay. This is going to be a fun conversational, it's not going to be your typical, interview, right? So if you guys got any questions, feel free to shout out. I'm open book, so we're going to have some fun today.
I just want to let the audience know that it is being recorded, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of this discussion. So earlier today, I saw you at Benson. You're beginning your tour. How do you like Santa Clara, the area? I know we promised 300 plus days of sunshine, and it was a cloudy day. You had to be here. But what are your thoughts?
No, it was great. I came from Los Angeles. I'm in North Hollywood area. Any LA folks in here in the house? Okay, yeah. Where are you from?
I'm from more like Torrance area.
Okay, yeah. Okay, nice. But we've been having a pretty crappy spring there too, so it's been pretty overcast as well. But Ricky gave me a tour of everything. You guys have a beautiful campus here. It's absolutely amazing. So it was good to see the facilities and see the new engineering building. So lucky y'all privileged to have a brand new complex here to study at. So pretty dope.
Okay, I want to get right into it. So debunking intelligence, shifting the mindset of being intelligent, especially in STEM. We have all this pressure of like when you introduce your major, like the first thing they say is like, oh my gosh, you must be smart, you know? And so just how we carry that confidence, but also like when you're struggling in classes or when you're struggling being the only person in your department or in your career field, how do you interact with everything like that?
Yeah, great question. And there's a topic I love to talk about, kind of debunking intelligence, because there's a lot of kind of misconceptions about what it means to be intelligent. I mean, first of all, I want to give kudos to everybody that's here, because I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves enough credit for the work that we put in. The fact that y'all are over here in engineering disciplines focused on your craft, just being here right now in this room is a lot, right? So give yourselves credit for every step along this educational journey that you guys are on, because you're going to look back and you're going to really understand the importance of the work that you're doing. I always talk about debunking intelligence in this way, right? Like, we think about the definition of science, right? Somebody can look this up. I think it's along the lines of the intellectual study or practice that involves the study of the behavior of the physical and natural world through like observation and experiments, right? But the really context of that is intellectual. So you think about, what does it mean to be intellectual? What does it mean to have intellect? And I think a lot of times we often limit ourselves due to like commonly used definitions. So show of hands right here. If I asked everybody in this room right now, show of hands, who would consider themselves to be highly intellectual? Okay, we got one, maybe two, little kid kind of out there, right? Let's say we propose this question to, I don't know, Kanye West. If you ask Kanye West his intellect level, what do you think he would say? He would consider himself to be highly intellectual, right? How about Elon Musk, right? If you had a conversation with Elon Musk and you asked him, hey, do you think you consider yourself highly intellectual? Yeah, he would have his hand up, right? And I really think about this in this context, right? All of us in this room should have our hands up. We use common phrases like, it's not rocket science, right? We've all said that before in order to really kind of break down something that's not difficult, to really showcase the other, or really to kind of elucidate that the other side is something that's far beyond our comprehension or understanding, right? And I think common phrases like that, it's not rocket science, are some phrases that have pushed countless of possibly game-changing future STEM leaders, future scientists, future entrepreneurs away from education, right? The thought or the notion that you have to be a genius or someone of high intellect in order to be able to pursue a career in these fields. And I'm sure all of you have faced that along your educational journeys, right? Talking to people ask you what your major is, and you're like, I'm electrical engineering, nuclear engineering, mechanical engineering. People are like, oh my God, it's crazy, right? There's a certain level of confidence, a certain level of understanding that people normally think of like, oh, you have to be this level of intellect in order to be able to do this field. And I want to be able to kind of showcase the importance that you have the confidence, right? Everybody has the ability to be able to be in this room right now, be able to pursue those careers. I look back at kind of my pursuit in engineering. I did a number of internships while I was in school. Has anybody here done any internships currently or currently in an internship? Okay. Those are always great ways for me to be able to get working experience, right, and learn. And I deviated so many different paths along my pursuit to engineering, but I did engineering internship with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, for a year. I worked in their air quality division as an air toxics engineer. We were collecting data and doing reports on air toxics in the Seattle region. That's where we are, University of Washington. So we're doing air toxic reports. The following year, I did an internship at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, Washington, where I worked as a nuclear engineer. And I remember the very first time I told someone that I was working as a nuclear engineer, I was on the bus on the way to the ferry to go to work in the morning. And this lady, she looked at me like I was absolutely crazy, right? She was like, you're a what? You know, I didn't fit that mode. I didn't fit that look, right? Baggy jeans, headphones. I did not look like what you would think a nuclear engineer would look like. But that moment stuck with me because that was also the last time that I told somebody that I was a nuclear engineer. Anytime somebody asked me what I did at the shipyard, I was just like, I'm just working on tools, no big deal, right? But I was actually working on a project where we were developing and designing these new innovative tools to be able to dissect the hulls of the nuclear submarines when they came back to the shipyard, right? And in a way, I looked at myself almost kind of like looking in the mirror and almost in disbelief, like, I can't do this. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. This isn't what people would assume a nuclear engineer would be. And I think part of that confidence that we have to move forward with is understanding and changing actually the face of what a scientist is supposed to look like, right? We have women here in this room, and I'm sure a lot of you women are probably one of few women in your engineering disciplines, right? Different cultural backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds. You may be the one of few in your disciplines. And a lot of times, that representation, when you don't have that, you kind of lose that belief in yourself, like, oh, is this the right place for me? Is this where I'm supposed to be at? And so when we think about debunking intelligence, right, we think about the confidence that we have to walk in whenever we walk into our doors, whenever we're pursuing different engineering disciplines, science disciplines, any major, right, that's going to take some complex thinking or some work to be able to now pursue and elevate your careers. And so I hope that's an element that you guys are all able to walk away with, right? To be able to now change the face of what intelligence is and know that all of you have the intelligence and all of you are worthy. That your knowledge or your ability is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that's only possessed by a select few. You have the intelligence that's able to change and reshape innovation and change the world. And you guys all have to walk in that confidence every day as you're pursuing your educational paths.
Okay, so now I want to repeat the question. How many guys do you think are intelligent? Really? Yeah! Okay.
Yes, that's right. All hands, all hands.
Okay, so speaking into self-belief and into existence, finding ways to validate and stimulate positive perspective of yourself. So once again, when you're looking in that mirror, now I'm like, okay, now I'm intelligent. But like, if I don't see representation in the room, like, how do I feel like, okay, like, I know I'm intelligent, but how do I carry this confidence into letting everyone else know that too?
Yeah, and that's difficult, right? We all, I know a lot of us here have played the code switching game, right? You have to have that certain mode when you walk into a room, and then maybe when you're in a meeting, you got to switch that, so you switch that code, right? Sometimes it gets such a, for a lot of us, it becomes natural, right? Especially as black folks, it becomes a natural thing. You just do. You don't necessarily think about it. And it could cross across all sorts of different circles, right? Different backgrounds, different families, whatever positions you're in. A lot of us code switch in that way, where we present ourselves in one light when we're in an educational field and present ourselves outwardly, maybe when we're around friends or other people that know us, right? We always kind of changing face in different ways. But But I think a lot of it comes with building community. I think about community a lot, especially now in the work that I'm doing as a science communicator. So I have my Hip Hop Science platform where I use music, entertainment, and comedy to educate on a wide variety of different scientific topics. Obviously, my background is in engineering, but I have a passion for all areas of science. So I touch on everything from wildlife, biology, to astrophysics, to math, everything in between, right? And a lot of times when we think about the confidence that we walked in, like I talked about walking in confidence, it's also about community and being able to bring together like-minded people and galvanizing our communities in a lot of different ways. And one of the difficulties that I had when I was pursuing my work in science communication is I didn't even know I was doing science communication when I started my work, right? My background was in engineering, but I always had an artistic background. I was big into music, right? Music was a big passion of mine. So all through elementary school and eventually into high school and then college, I was working as a music artist. So I was in the studio, I was producing, I was songwriting for artists, started doing tours, all sorts of crazy stuff in the music scene, right? And I had a code switch in that element as well too, right? I wasn't in the studio talking about engineering and infrastructure, right? And concrete foundation. I wasn't talking about that, right? But then in the other side as well too, on the educational side, I wasn't be able to present what I did, outside of work. And I remember one kind of defining moment that I had. I was working in my job after I graduated. I took a job at Turner Construction, big engineering firm. We did a lot of heavy infrastructure projects. So I was working on high rises. I was working on data center projects. I did a stadium project, a renovation project for Husky Stadium. And I remember at that time I had a couple music projects that were out, a couple music videos, and then I was also working on my first business at the time, which was called Booty Pillows. I know it sounds crazy. It's crazy. It's as crazy as you think, right? It was literally a booty, like a pillow shaped like a booty, right? If you guys may have seen a viral video of it that went crazy a few years back. And I remember, and I did a voiceover for this video, and I remember at one corner of the room hearing a song of mine that I released in the office. Right, and I was like, that sounds like my song. And some of my coworkers were like huddled around a computer, like listening to this video. And then the next day, somebody else was watching this our Booty Pillows like promo video that we put out that had like gone viral on YouTube and stuff, right? And people were like, "Wait, but you do this? This is what you know?" And it was almost a weird realization of like playing this kind of Clark Kent, like Superman character, right? In the office, I put on this face, right? Suited, tied, booted up, all that. And then outside of the office, I was presenting a whole different image, And it really came to a point where I felt like I was living two separate lives, right? And something had to give. And that's really what led me from resigning from my position and moving down to LA to pursue entertainment work, right? Is because I didn't really have an outlet to be able to showcase my creative side and feel like I was accepted in that side, right? And it took me getting down to LA, going through all sorts of different ups and downs as I was pursuing entertainment, roundabout coming back to education and engineering with my science platform, but it all came from building a community. And you guys have that right now. This is a start of community, right? The peers that you have in the room, the educators, the teachers that you have here as well too. This is where the community starts, and we think about kind of breaking that mold and breaking that kind of perception culturally of what engineers are supposed to be or what they're supposed to look like, and how do we galvanize people, right? And this is where the pipeline starts, so being able to now reach back to the youth, reach back to others, reach back to people that are coming in interested in possibly going engineering but maybe don't know exactly what their path is supposed to be. Starting out with community and finding ways to bring that community together and unite people goes a long way in being able to now shift that narrative as you continue to pursue your educational paths.
Okay, sorry, I turned off my mic. And so when you're at your job when you're at your job doing your career and also the side with music and everything, finding your purpose, I feel like you kind of found your purpose with music and everything, and maybe your job wasn't really like, you weren't fulfilled with the job you were at. Yeah. And I know it's kind of scary to like follow your dreams and everything, especially when you don't have like that financial support or background and able to do that. So how are you able to go into engineering and then also support what truly fulfills you, even if you're not able to go into your music career like you were?
Yeah. For me, passion is a big thing, right? I always live by this quote: when you find your passion, it becomes your purpose, and you can no longer be passive, right? And I think about everything that I've done, all the crazy different background, from music to acting, commercial work to entrepreneurialism to engineering, right? These are all things that I've built curiosity in, and I kind of coined this phrase that I use in a lot of my educational videos. Curiosity is nature's PhD. And I talk about how curiosity has fueled a lot of the understanding and the knowledge that I have, right? And I think, especially as an entrepreneur, and definitely, whether it's in business or whether it's doing science work, I'm always purpose-driven. I think everything comes from a purpose, and I think working with a lot of different creatives on all sorts of different fronts, I feel like if you're not led by purpose, if your goal isn't purpose-driven, then your path to success is always going to be difficult, right? You have to find a way to be able to be not self-serving, to be able to help others, right? To be able to have that mission, that focus of like, okay, how am I going to utilize my skill sets to now help others and change a narrative, move something else forward, right? And so everything that I've done has been non-self-serving. So I look at like my business, right? Our food business, Jada Brands. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, everybody wants to make money. In a capitalistic society, right? That's always the goal, to make money. But we kind of looked at the core of our business, right? And my friend who was a co-founder of the business, his dad suffered from a lot of different health problems, right? And part of his mantra was, I want to be able to find a way that we can be able to encourage healthier home cooking. And I had the same thing with my family: diabetes, high blood pressure, all these different things, right? And so when we started coming up with the idea of like, hey, we want to bring this seasoning from Australia, bring it to the US and create a healthier version of it, that was kind of our focus, was like, yes, we want to be able to find a way to be able to help others. And having that purpose within that mission, I think, has helped us in so many different ways to be able to navigate when obstacles get tough, to be able to deviate when one path isn't working, to be able to find, okay, how do we now yield success in this other area? And it was also the same thing with my Hip Hop Science platform, right? So obviously, having the background in entertainment. When I first started, I wasn't trying to be a science communicator. Like, that wasn't what I was going into. I'd already shifted into the entertainment side, and I started getting into a lot of on-camera work. And I wanted to be able to bring my true, authentic self to the camera. And who was I? I was this weird nerd that was into music and entertainment, but also loved dropping random science facts in like inappropriate situations, right? And so the Hip Hop Science platform started out as a sketch idea. I was working with a lot of different comedians in LA, and I was like, okay, how do I bring a character that's true to me to the forefront? And so that was how the whole Hip Hop M.D. character came about, right? And within that, when I started seeing that people were actually learning something from my videos, the whole kind of shift was, okay, I've been in this path, right, where I've seen people that look like me not being interested in engineering, not being interested in science. And I was like, how can we find a unique way to be able to galvanize our communities and spark that interest? And that was across a lot of different disciplines, because I was realizing that in a lot of different paths, people just weren't generally as excited and hyped and nerding out about science topics like I was, and I'm sure a lot of us here, we nerd out about random science facts and different topics all the time, and trying to find that community that could be able to be in that mindset with you. And so for me, kind of changing that narrative was like, okay, how do I now support others that have been in the position that I have, that may have been that person that was on that boat on the way to work and had their knowledge questioned, right, by somebody that didn't believe that that's what they actually did as a career, right? And so for me, kind of the whole focus was, how do I encourage more minority and youth involvement into the STEM fields? And that became the crux of everything that I do with my Hip Hop Science platform, was how do we now give back? How do I inspire? How do I spark curiosity? And I think once you start developing that purpose and understand that mission in what you're trying to pursue, that goes such a long way in helping you navigate whatever path that you're going to navigate in. And then it also enables you to be a lot more multifaceted as well. You can be able to now pursue other opportunities. You can now be able to say, hey, I've always had an interest in this side hobby of mine that I never thought could go anywhere, but now I have the confidence, I have the focus to understand, okay, this is how I develop this and turn this into something great. And so I think finding that purpose in everything that you do will go a long way in helping you navigate what you're trying to pursue.
I just want to emphasize, curiosity is nature's PhD. That's a really good takeaway. And so that's pushing the boundaries and in STEM and art and music and everything. How are you able to balance, how are you able to balance STEM with engineering and being like successful with your music? Because now that you have your channel and everything, what was like people's perspective when you're like, okay, I'm going into this more creative side that's normally more tapped in, more people enjoy it, but everyone's kind of like a little bit scared to do and a little bit more okay. You were going down this path of engineering, which is very like you have, your mathematics, your science, everything that's so fine line, to the complete opposite where there's no boundaries, and being able to tie both of those and pushing the boundaries of STEM and everything like that.
When I first told people that I was leaving my job to move to LA, people looked at me, I was crazy, right? That was the first thing. And I have African parents. I don't know anybody here African descent, right? What's your background? Tanzanian. How about you? Nigerian, yeah. So I'm half Nigerian, half Cameroonian. So my dad's side is from Nigeria, my mom's side is from Cameroon. And I was raised in Cameroon when I was younger. I lived there for 5 years before I kept coming back to the States. So everybody knows the African parent mindset, right? You're either going to become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, like those are your only options, right? Nothing else is worthy enough for us, right? And so people looked at me like I was crazy, and that was even my friends, my peers, right? But that wasn't even just from then. That started early on, right? Engineering actually wasn't my first passion. I actually wanted to study wildlife biology. That was my very first interest. I grew up just being in love with the natural world. I was that kid that would just go out and explore and catch snakes and salamanders and insects. I was just in love with the natural world. And I remember my mom at the time had got me these like wildlife fact cards, and I used to be able to list off random facts about any organism. Like to this day, I just know random useless facts about all sorts of different animals. And so I initially wanted to go into wildlife biology. That was the area that I wanted to study. And I remember my first year at UW, and I told somebody my intended major, and everybody was like, wildlife biology? Like, what, you want to sit in trees and look at animals all day? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. And I had peers, I even had educators that all talked me out of it. They're like, no, you don't want to go into that. You want to go where the money's at. You want to go into engineering. You want to go into medicine. That's where the money's at. And it really stuck with me, obviously, right? Because I'm going to college here. I'm going to be spending the next 4 or 5 years spending this money, right? I want to be able to walk away with a career that's going to, bring me some success, that I'll be able to support myself and be able to support my family as well, too. So I started looking at other areas that could still get me into the science world, but were not, obviously, wildlife biology. And I got involved into NSBE, like I'm sure a lot of you are in here. Yeah, NSBE squad. Yep. And so I started meeting other peers, people that looked like me, interested in engineering fields. And I was like, okay, I looked at civil environmental engineering. I was like, okay, this is an opportunity. I could still be kind of around the ballpark of environmental, elements. But now there's going to be focused on engineering. But I always look back at that time, right? And yes, I graduated my degree, which I'm proud of, right? I worked hard for it. But it was also a deviation from what I originally wanted to pursue. And the ironic part now is that with my platform, with a lot of the work that I do, a lot of my content is around wildlife biology, because that was always my first passion. That was something I always loved. I spent a month out at sea 2 years ago working with marine biologists doing this crazy ocean research project on board the EV Nautilus. And I'm actually going back again in a week and a half to do a week-long mapping trip. We're going to map uncharted areas of the ocean floor. I'm on the board of directors for this rainforest organization. We're protecting a plot of land in Ecuador. And I'm going to be going with a team next year to be able to charter a whole new area that we're looking to protect in Ecuador. And then I've worked with all sorts of different wildlife organizations, and with the Museum of Science of Boston, that have a partnership where we do a lot of their animal outreach work. So kind of roundabout full circle, I came back to what I loved. I came back to what I originally had my passion in, And I think we all get jaded by life and life experiences, right? And all these little things dim us of those curious sparks that we initially have, right? That kind of direction of following what we love, And I think we've all been in that ballpark where we've had those experiences, and where we have to retool, we have to reshape, we have to find something else to be able to pursue. And so I say all this in the framework of, right now, obviously you guys are doing engineering. I've deviated in so many different pathways, right? And they always talk about the path to success, and it's never linear, right? There's never just a direct path to success. That path has always been like this, maybe it goes, curves back. It's gone all sorts of different areas because, I've always been the type where I follow things that I love and I follow things that I'm curious about. And so I loved music, I loved entertainment. And so I always thought to myself, what if, right? What would happen if I didn't do it, right? I know what would happen if I didn't do it. I'd be exactly where I'm at right now. But what would happen if I did pursue something different? And so that's what I always led with in all of my transitions into entrepreneurialism, into science communication, all these different areas, was thinking about what opportunities can this open up for me? And that's why I kind of love the phrase curiosity is nature's PhD, because a lot of these areas and a lot of the work that I do, I don't have that educational credential necessarily for the scope of work in a lot of different areas that I do. I didn't have any background in food. I didn't know anything about food, or I started a food business. I learned on the way, and I always tell people like I got like an MBA on the fly, right? Just being thrown into the mix and having to figure it out. And all of you are going to go through that path as well too, whether you stick with engineering disciplines or whether you go into a different field. As you move along your career, so many different things are going to spark interest in you, whether it's a company that you want to transition into, whether it's an area of research, whether it's pursuing another advanced degree, getting your master's, getting your PhD. You're always going to go through these new shifts in life. And you have to understand what is the reason behind my mission here? Why am I going into this area? What can this provide for me? And then also be confident with the fact that that could change. That could result into something else. And we're past that stage of like, oh, we graduate and we stay at a job, we work at that same place for 30, 40 years until we die or whatever, or retire, right? We have the flexibility to be able to transition into so many different things. And, the world is truly your oyster. And that's kind of how my framework of looking at everything. And so my parents now look back at me at the work that I've done, and yeah, I didn't go in that direction that they wanted me to pursue, but at the end of the day, I followed what made me happy, and now I'm able to reap the benefits for that. And so and that ties into having that passion, having that purpose, and everything that you're going after as well.
You kind of took what I kind of wanted to say. Like growing up, it's like you graduate, you get your degree, and you stick with this one company until retirement. And just kind of trying to shift, like that's what my parents are doing. And so just kind of shifting that mentality of, okay, this company isn't fulfilling me anymore, or my work isn't fulfilling me anymore, and switching. And so your advice, so if you go back, we're still in school, you just graduated, and you're at your civil engineering company, and you're like, okay, I don't feel fulfilled. What advice do you have now, going through all these different disciplines of your career, that you wish you would have had at that time, thinking about changing?
Yeah. That's a great question. Fulfillment is tough, right? Because, and it kind of ties into what I talked about, right? Following what you love and following what you're passionate about. But even as you go into what you're passionate about, it still might not fulfill you. It might not fulfill you financially, right? That's a big thing, right? Your wallet needs to be fulfilled as well too. So whatever deviation that you go into, you're going to come across a lot of obstacles and a lot of hurdles. And I think for me, to answer your question directly, the advice that I wish that I'd been given to be able to understand is, okay, how do I manifest my dreams, but at the same time be able to bring that consistency to the table, right? And understanding that things are going to deviate, things are going to change, but the more and more you stay in your lane and focus, the opportunities are going to come across, right? And there's so many times where I could have quit. I could have moved on into something else. But I always say, and this goes across the board with education, this goes across the board as entrepreneur, consistency is key, right? Putting in the work, putting in the effort, day in, day out. And I always tell people there's no such thing as failure. There's no such thing as failure whatsoever. You only shift, you only transition, right? So I even look back at like my, going into music, right? I love music. That was an area, my dream was always to be on a stage, right? And performing in front of millions of people, or, being on a, Billboard, top 10 or whatever, right? I had all these like crazy musical goals. And people always ask like, oh, are you like upset? Like your career didn't go where it wanted to in music? And I'm like, no, because in a way I get to do that in what I'm doing now with this hip hop science platform, right? I'm not performing necessarily in front of stages and millions of people, but I have an opportunity to go across the country, all across the globe. I do keynote presentations with schools. I work with educators. I do a lot of outreach work. I'm able to bring that love of performing and being on stage and presenting. I'm able to bring that out on a day-to-day basis in the work that I'm doing, right? And so for me, I never look at it as, oh, I gave up in that area. It only shifted. It only transitioned. And I think you guys will find that in your careers as you're working, regardless of whatever transition you end up making career-wise or educational-wise. There's never a point where you should ever feel like, oh, I have to give up on what I'm doing. You just have to redirect. You just have to look at, hey, what's working, what's not working? How do I now still go after what I want to pursue, but do it in a diligent way to where I'm still able to bring my skill sets to the table, but now I'm able to now transition and open new doors and open new lanes. And that's why we talk about the path to success, right? It's never linear because you're going to go through those ups and downs. And every time you go through those downs, if you just gave up and then tried something completely brand new, right, you miss out on the opportunity where you could have hit that new level, that new peak where you can be able to now elevate. And so that's a big thing that I always think about that I kind of wish that I knew earlier on, was that there was really no giving up. I kind of found that out the hard way by kind of banging my head against the wall a lot of time. It's like, when is this going to happen? How is this going to work? How is this going to take off? But remaining consistent over those times and then staying in your lane, finding your own voice, finding what works for you, I think is also key as well too. Because a lot of times, especially now in this social media age, it's easy to compare and contrast to others and what other people are doing, right? We feel that natural pressure of like, oh, this person has a successful career. This person's doing this person's over here doing this. And, social media obviously glamorizes a lot of that stuff too as well, that lifestyle. And so we kind of have that mentality of that's what we have to do to be successful. And a lot of times you have to remind yourself, stay in your lane, focus on what you do best. The skills that you have are much different than the skills that you have, right? And the skills that you have are completely different than somebody else that's out here on campus, right? You have to focus on what your voice is, focus on your direction, what you bring to the table, what's unique about you. And once you're able to really dive into that, now you're able to elevate and you're able to showcase that to others. And that's when opportunities start developing more and more for you.
Wow. I really want to highlight failure isn't like a thing. It's just a shift. And so thank you. And I kind of want to shift to you guys. If you have any questions, I want to open up the Q&A. If you guys can raise your hand, I can call on you guys.
Yeah.
This my question would be, when you speak about like failure and that, obviously it's like one thing to know like failure isn't where it stops, but it's another thing to like when you get stuck in a rut, like how do you get by that? Like I imagine you must have had a moment where you must have felt like stuck. How did you what was it that pushed you forward in that moment or like got you through it?
Yeah, I'll give kind of a direct story with my platform. So I started my Hip Hop Science platform around 2017 or so. And at the time I made like a couple of videos on YouTube, whatever, that took off. And I got reached out to at that time by Kevin Hart's digital company, his LOL Productions. And I signed this development deal with the company. And he at that time was launching this digital platform. The show that I was working on at that time was going to be kind of the flagship show that was going to launch this platform. And it wasn't the Hip Hop Science show like what work I'm doing now. It was kind of more of this like talking head ensemble kind of show where we're going to have like comedians and we're going to break down music in interesting ways, right? And the Hip Hop Science segment was going to be like one element within the show. But I was going to come on board as producer for the show. We had a whole big launch party, right? Rented out this mansion, did this crazy party, and I'm on cloud nine. Like, you couldn't tell me nothing, right? So, and we're about to launch this show. We're going to be on this major network, working with Kevin Hart, all this stuff. And then the show got shelved, right? There was like some internal stuff going on. And at that time, I didn't really know much about signing deals or contracts. I was like, oh, shoot, you guys want to put this show on TV? Let's do it. I was signing whatever. And I kind of signed away a lot of the rights to putting out content. And so I couldn't even put out stuff on social media. I was sitting on this content for like 2 years, waiting for them to figure out what was going on internally. And long story short, it never developed, right? And so 2019, I got all the rights back, right? Because everything sizzled out in that show, and the duration of the contract had expired. And so 2019, I was like, okay, my goal is I'm gonna create a video. I'm gonna make a YouTube video every single week. I'm gonna release a video every single week, kind of diving into what I want to talk about in the science world. I was gonna kind of change the narrative of what they were gonna try to twist that show into and make it mine. And so every week I was putting out new videos, putting out content. I was going to random places, showing up in my lab coat and headphones, and just doing crazy interviews and meeting people. And things like towards that end of the year, things like kind of started changing and shifting. And then the pandemic happened in, obviously 2020, right? And we all know how that went, right? But I think for me at that time, the focus that I had during that year of 2019 of like, okay, this may not necessarily go exactly where I want to take it to, but let me figure out how I can be consistent in the work that I do so that at the end of the day, nobody can tell me that I didn't put any effort into it. And so for me, consistency was the key. And so what happened is in 2020, as the pandemic and everything shut down, I had an arsenal of content and things that I've been working on because I'd been consistently writing. I've been consistently making things. Not everything went out every week. So I had this whole catalog of things to put out, which I started doing a lot more, obviously, in 20 because I had just plenty of time to be able to put stuff out. And that's when things with the platform really started shifting and opening up doors for me. And so for me, that's what really got me through, was finding ways to be consistent, right? Doing what you can control, focusing on what it is that you can control, because there's going to be all sorts of different things around us that are going to make us shift into other directions or pull us into other directions. But what is it that you can focus on? What is it that you have total control over that can't be dictated by anybody else? And that's the work that you put in. That's the focus that you put in. And so that's what got me through during that time. And the same thing can be said about our business as well, too. Like, we had plenty ups and downs, moments where we're calling distributors day to day, trying to get our products in the doors, not hearing back from anybody, but still making those calls, still going to food festivals randomly in all sorts of different countries or different states, just showing up, right? Being present and putting that work in. And over time, that diligence that we had, that fortitude and that consistency is what helped us open the doors and eventually meeting the right contact, getting in the right position to where now we were looked at differently because we had put in that time, we had put in that energy. And so that would be my advice, is how can you control the narrative? What things can you now focus on to be consistent that you have total control over?
So showing up for yourself every day.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah, it does.
Just what's your favorite memory doing your science hip hop stuff? Like, maybe helped a particular kid out, or just some specific thing that really highlights, like, kind of makes your work feel like really valuable?
Yeah, that's a great question. That actually happened last year. Actually, there's a student, a fifth grader in Seattle. I got an email from a teacher, and she was like, "Hey, my student wants to interview you for this." They're doing this kind of pitch where they're talking about their heroes, and he wanted to interview me and do this kind of mastermind session interview where he kind of talked about what it meant, what heroes meant, and then be able to showcase his hero and somebody that he looked up to. And apparently this kid had watched a bunch of videos of mine and loved obviously what I presented, and wanted to do an interview with me. And so I did the interview with the students. It was funny because the teacher had kind of forced him into the Zoom meeting because he was shy. He didn't want to come talk to me. But eventually I interviewed him, and he edited together this whole mastermind interview where he had a presentation. He talked about my background, talked about what heroes meant, and he shared the video with me. And that was that moment right there was a moment where I realized the reach that I had in the work that I was doing, because a lot of times you're working on something and you kind of know your audience for the most part, and I touch obviously on a lot of different spectrums: elementary, high school, college. I obviously work with educators, so I have a full spectrum. But to know that that student in fifth grade was watching my content and enjoying it and learning something and was that connected to it, really kind of shifted the understanding of like, okay, this is the capacity of what I can do with my platform. This is the impact that it's making, you know. It's like, here I have, you know, a young Latino boy who's, you know, he said he didn't really have anybody else that looked like him interested in science, and that was one thing that he connected with the work that I was doing. And to be able to know that I made an impact on a child that young at that age, and then full circle, I got a chance to meet him like a few months later because I happened to be in Seattle for a presentation. And because the teacher told me, hey, let me know anytime you're here, we'll find a way to meet you. And I met up with him at their school. His dad came out and introduced us and had a chance to really, you know, connect with him in person. And so for me, that was definitely a defining moment where I understood the value of the work that I was doing and the importance of the work that I was doing as well.
So over the internet, you're kind of fostering this community of mentorship that you don't even know about at all. And so I know there's a bunch of programs like SCU, Mentor Collective, and ways to get mentored or be a mentor. Do you have any advice like for someone wanting to be mentored by someone? I don't know if you've had mentorships throughout your career, I assume so. And then also vice versa, mentoring someone in your field, like a freshman or someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mentorships, those are always a tough one, right? Because I think a lot of times that pressure is on us, right? We think, oh, this person's never going to support me, right? This person's not going to have the time, the capacity. But if you have that mentality, you're going to limit yourself. So I always say you always got to shoot for the moon, right? You always got to, you know what's going to happen if you don't try, right? But what happens if you try, right? What if you just send that email? What if you just send that, you know, that slide in the DMs, right? Send that message. You don't know who's going to be on the other end at that time that the stars might align and might work for you. If you have somebody that you're interested in, somebody that you admire, somebody that you love the work that they're doing and they present, reach out to them. You know, you reach out to them. That's all it takes. You know, the worst they could say is no. Okay, yeah, sorry, I don't have the time. Or maybe they ignore you, right? You never hear back from them. I've had friends that messaged somebody and then the person got back to them like 2 years later. Right, but they got back to them. Right, it wasn't the time they needed, but they got back to them eventually when the timing was right. But that's because they reached out. Right. And so I think for all of you, and I think mentorship is a really important thing, especially at this stage right now. You guys are in school. Obviously, you have your teachers that you can look up to, that you can be able to connect with and talk outside the classroom. But I think it's really important to have mentors, and especially outside of spaces that aren't even necessarily your field, which I think is really great as well too. Give you different perspectives, give you different understandings. Right? I think that's a unique way to be able to evaluate who can be a mentorship. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's doing the job or the career that you're in, but it's somebody that you admire the work, their effort, their passion that they bring to whatever it is that they're doing. There's so many different tools that you can learn from different people, right? And I love supporting and love giving back. If any of you need mentorship or help or advice, you know, on B2B Mentor, or you want to be able to connect you with anybody else, feel free. You guys have my contact information. You guys can reach out to me as well. I'm always able to pass on different contacts, steer you in the right direction, or assist you if it's an area that I can assist as well too. So, you know, you just got to be able to put yourself out there, think outside the box, right? And don't be scared to see what happens.
I want to open it up again if anyone has any more questions. Yes.
First of all, thank you for sharing your journey. It's fascinating to me. And my question is, how do you know it's the right time to transition from your normal job to something you're passionate about, like in the entertainment industry, like music, everything?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something I struggled with, honestly, for a long time, and even right now, to be frank, that's something that I'm trying to figure out, because for me, in every single business pursuit that I've done, I never settle, right? And sometimes people can look at that as that's a positive trait. It can be a negative trait as well too, right? I'm always thirsty for more. I'm always trying to figure out what's next, right? Sometimes I admire people that can be somewhat complacent, like, okay, I'm satisfied with what I'm doing. I'm going to do this, you know, for however long it gets me, right? Sometimes I look at those people and I'm like, I wish I could just feel like that sometimes, because my brain is always like, okay, how can I improve? What can I get better at? What can I do next, right? and I'm sure some of you may be in that mental space as well too. So even right now, I get a chance to do a lot of cool stuff with the work that I'm doing, but I'm always kind of thinking in the future, okay, how can I scale this? How can I get ahead? Because I don't want to just be, rest on my laurels right now of where I'm at. I want to be able to now look a year, 2 years, 3 years ahead and figure out, okay, what's going to give me the best advantage to be able to elevate and grow this? How can I support more people? How can I grow in the areas that I want to pursue? How can I learn more, right? And so I think it's not necessarily like a specific time that you're going to know that, because right now I'm kind of letting it develop. I'm aware that I want to make another shift and I want to kind of transition and elevate the work that I'm currently doing. I think you got to ask yourself, when do you start asking those questions? When do you get to that point where you're not satisfied with what you're currently doing? Right? And once you start questioning what you're doing, you start questioning like, okay, what else is out there? And who knows, you might be Googling stuff. You might be, talking to others about what work they're doing, right? When you start asking those questions and you start seeking, that's the time that, you're ready to make a shift. And that doesn't mean that idea is going to come immediately to you. You just have to be present in that moment when you start asking those questions. You have to be present and honest with yourself. Like, okay, I'm asking these questions. My body, my mindset is telling me that it's time to shift into something else. But you also have to have the patience and the flexibility and within yourself to wait for that right opportunity to open up. And so I always tell people, like, when you're in that mode, when you start questioning and you start trying to figure out, okay, what's next, right? Do your best to be immersed in every possible thing that you can. Engage with your peers, ask other people what they're doing, think outside the box into new things that you can be aware of, right? Start doing, right? That's all I say, start doing, the classic Nike, but just do it, right? Just start doing and being active. For me, I'm a big extrovert, right? So I gain energy from being around people, asking questions, engaging, figuring out, okay, these people are doing this. Okay, you're doing this. Okay, that's cool. How do you do it? And I start asking questions. Wherever I go, I start asking questions. I meet people that are doing cool things. I start asking questions. And you'll start to find out that when you're in that stage where your mind is ready to transition, the more active you are, the more engaged you are with people around you, with your peers, mentors, other people, right? And you start asking those questions, those opportunities will start to develop and you'll start to see that door present itself. You'll start to slowly see things open up for you. Like, oh, okay, I was talking about this the other day and now I met somebody that's doing that one thing that I was talking about. I didn't think I was going to meet them, and now they just showed up here in this classroom or at a Starbucks, whatever it may be, right? You'll start to kind of see the universe and the way it kind of manifests different things, and that's because you put that energy out there. I'm always a big thing on energy, like when you especially like positivity, right? If you want to have positive things happen, you have to come through with a positive mindset, right? If you stay pessimistic and always like, never things ever work out, then nothing's ever going to work out, right? So staying in that mindset of like, I'm going to be positive, I'm going to let things come in, I'm going to be open to new opportunities, that's when you'll start to see those doors open for you. And so when you start asking those questions, just stay active and stay engaged in that moment and present yourself in front of those doors, and things will definitely work out.
Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful questions. Feel free to... Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Tokubo Gufuri. I'm the faculty advisor for NSBE on campus. I wanted to ask you about your statement about getting diverse voices to have involvement in STEM. Mm-hmm. It aligns very well with the NSBE mission statement. But the issue is, how do you get them to get over the hump of saying mathematics is hard or difficult? Because STEM requires some kind of knowledge of math, and how do you get them to feel at ease with that and be able to overcome any obstacles? I know part of it is because the background in math may not be solid enough to, for example, pursue a career in STEM. But you have to show that up before you can do it. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest too, math was one of my worst subjects. I don't know if do you guys have a aeronautics course here? Anybody in the aeronautics course?
There's a minor right now.
Yeah. There was this aeronautics class that I took. By far the worst class that I failed the class. Had to do it again. I barely passed the second time. And I think that's a common thing, right? We always talk about math, right? I think across anybody, not just engineering majors, right? You'll talk to anybody walking down the street. Everybody's always like, math, I don't know math, blah, blah, blah. That's a common kind of thought process that we all have, right? And I really started doing the work that I do now. I started to realize a little bit about the basis of why I think that is, and everybody might have the kind of reasons, right? But it really starts off early. Right? It starts off early as youth, the way that we're presented a lot of topics. I grew up with standardized courses, right, where everybody was just kind of put on the same playing field. You're given this, and I was a type, I never did well on any standardized tests, whether it was SATs, ACTs. By the time I got into college, doing finals, exams, anytime there was an exam, quiz, I was horrible, right? Assignments, I would kill. I could do assignments all day. Give me some time to research and figure things out. I could do assignments all day, but when I get tested on it, for whatever reason, I couldn't produce, right? And I think early on, we get in that mindset where we're like, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not skilled at this. Because a little bit about that mindset of how those things are presented to us and how those topics are presented to us. I'm really big on application of different things, right? To be able to understand how this applies to the real world. And I think a lot of times in a lot of areas, I feel we fail in science disciplines sometimes. Not everywhere, because some places do a really good job, is how is this work that you're doing now applicable to actual real world challenges and real world things, right? I took all sorts of crazy math classes, Math 308, where we're doing all sorts of crazy functions. I'm like, when am I ever going to use this, right? I never actually used any of those Math 308 skills, the things that I learned, but they gave me that kind of ability to think, have that cognitive thinking, right? To think outside the box, that complex thinking, which goes a long way when you are working in the field, right? It's how do I now solve these problems? And that's really what those courses do for you. I can't remember the other educator that we met earlier, Ricky, that Alan, that had the Frugal Innovation Lab, right? That was really awesome to learn more about that work, right? Because that was a true showcasing of the application of the work that you're doing. And I think sometimes we fail to do that, even on the education side, as educators, as teachers, is how is this applicable necessarily to what you're going to utilize, and where can you actually make a change in the field? So I think it's on both sides. I think it's part on the education side to be able to showcase this true application. Why are you learning this material? What is the why that you're doing this? Why are you putting the energy into learning these functions and all these different things? How is this going to transition into something that's going to assist you in your career? The more we understand understand the why and the usefulness of it, then it starts to expand our frame of thinking. So we're not just looking at it these are just numbers and these are just problems on a piece of paper that I have to solve. Now this is okay, this is the critical thinking that's going to enable me to develop this, or to be able to innovate this, or to be able to expand and open the door in this area, or change somebody's life in this medical field. Now it starts to make you start to have this cognitive understanding of where it can actually take you. And I think that starts on the education side of how we deliver that message to the students in a way to where they understand there is a why behind what I'm doing, and this is actually going to be fruitful for me in the next iteration of where I'm trying to go with my work. And so I think that comes from the education side, but I think a lot of us now in engineering doing these classes, and I'm not what's here? Is everybody sophomores, juniors? What's everybody's stage? Sophomores, most everybody sophomores here. Freshman year, yeah. So you're going to go through those kind of ups and downs where you're like, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be, right? I went through those moments as well too. I mean, we had a place called the Instructional Center. And it was kind of like our diversity and inclusion center, and we were able to go there. We were able to get free tutoring, and so I used to stay in that lab all day, every day, because I could not understand this material. I'm like, I just got to live here, which I did. I spent many all-nighters in that lab, just working with tutors, working with peers, right? There are people in that class I remember that would just they would go to this class and they would just pick up on that material easy, right? They'd go in there, start doing the assignment, and you've probably all seen those people where you're like, how do you get that just from that set? Like, that made no sense to me whatsoever, right? I was the type that had to do the extra work. I had to read more. I had to I had to really dive in. The stuff didn't just settle in me. And if you're in that boat as well too, the best thing you can do is engage, right? Work with others, teamwork. Because at the end of the day, once you start working in the field, you're not going to be working solo. You're all going to be working in teams anyway, right? You're not going to be responsible for everything that happens in the engineering firm. You're all going to be doing collaborative work in whatever science discipline that you end up going into. And so learning how to work and connect with your peers, and then learning how to, apply that consistency that we talked about earlier into the classroom as well too, to now, if you know that, hey, it takes me a little bit longer to learn this information, to be able to put in that time and to be able to get the support that you need, reach out to other people, ask questions, if your teachers have study time, research time, go in there and engage with them as well too. There's so many different ways that you can now be able to be more immersed into that material to where you can now, expand your comfort level and understand, like, hey, I can get through this. I can make it through this, because you're not the only one going through that struggle. It's a common, communal struggle that everybody's dealing with, but you have the tools and you have the support group and support system around you to be successful.
Does anyone have any more questions? Okay. So as we're starting to wrap up and everything, what do you want the audience to take away from this discussion and everything? What's something that you wish we covered, or that, the takeaway?
We talked on a wide variety of stuff. I'm open to afterwards if anybody wants to come up and ask any questions about any different things. I'm surprised nobody asked about the Shark Tank experience. I feel like that's the question I always. So there's always one person that's like, "What was it like? What is it?"
I asked that, but I was trying to be respectful.
Ask your question. See, that's right there. Like, never be shy. If you want to know something, you have to ask questions. I said curiosity is nature's PhD. You're never going to learn unless you ask and engage, right? So do you have a question about?
My literal question was, what was the experience on Shark Tank like? But I figured this is for them, the students. I'm here to listen, and so I will live without knowing that, and I was trying to be respectful of your time. So I didn't ask it, but you're sharing.
I was going to ask you, how's Jada Spice doing now?
We're doing good. So, for people that probably aren't from, because we didn't really touch too much about the business. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So the business is called Jada Brands. We started out with a line of chicken salt seasonings. Okay, if you go to Australia, have anybody ever been to Australia before? Yeah. So if you go to Australia, like any household, you ask for salt, pepper, or chicken salt. Right? Chicken salt's a common seasoning that they use in Australia, but the one that they have there is made with MSG, dehydrated chicken fat. Chicken salt is more of like a bouillon. And my business partner, he grew up in Australia using chicken salt. And I remember he was here in the States, and he was, he's now a dermatologist, and he was trying to find ways to be able to get his patients to eat better. And he always remembered like chicken salt, what he had growing up. And he was like, there's a great way to be able to make like foods taste better. And we started having this kind of funny dialogue about it. And he was like, there's no chicken salt here in the US. We couldn't find chicken salt. And so we're like, okay, how do we encourage healthier home cooking? Let's take this like magnificent product, bring it here to the States, and create a healthier version of it. And so we created vegan chicken salt. It's same flavor profile, but much healthier. You can use it as a substitute to chicken bouillon or a regular all-purpose seasoning. And so we literally started slinging seasonings. Like, we were making seasonings in the kitchen. We got bags of garlic salt, of garlic and onion powder and turmeric, right? We're manufacturing bottles at the house. We started kind of going to small little farmers markets. We started, website, trying to do a little bit of e-commerce work. And then we got to a point where we're like, man, we got to like really let's go full guerrilla mode on this. And so we started just sending products to random places to see if people would like do something with it. We send products to the Food Network. We would send products to big restaurants. We'd find suppliers. We send stuff anywhere. And Valerie Bertinelli, she has this big show on the Food Network, somehow got a hold of our product and did this like recipe on the Food Network. And that's when things kind of started taking off. People started getting a little bit more familiar with the business. And there was like maybe another 3 years or so after that, we started selling on Amazon, and we started becoming really well known within the vegan community. We're going to vegan festivals all throughout the country. We would just tour everywhere. We'd fly, buy tickets, we'd drive to wherever, and we'd just sell seasonings at different festivals and kind of built up a name for it. And then we got blessed with the opportunity at the beginning or at the end of 2019 to be on the follow-up season for the Shark Tank. So we found out about they had the whole like casting thing, right? And it was one of those live castings where you just got to show up and you have like thousands of people that are just in line, right, waiting. So I sat in line for like 10 hours waiting to just get an opportunity to present, or pitch, or we had like a chance to do a 1-minute pitch. And that was in Kentucky. So I took like a red-eye flight, flew to Kentucky, sat in line for 10 hours, did like a quick little 1-minute pitch of our product. About a month later, we got a call back that we made it to the next round, and then finally made it to the final round, which was at the beginning of 2020. And then the pandemic happened, right? And we're like, oh no, we just lost this opportunity. But then we got a call. They were like, oh, we're going to do a bubble show. And so we were on the bubble season. So 2020, we were in Las Vegas. They had us in the bubble, so it's completely different than their normal taping, which they usually do in a big lot in Los Angeles. So we were in the bubble season. We're in the Venetian for a week. So it was actually really luxe accommodations. I always tell people like we were trapped in a bubble where we were at room service and we're staying in this like luxury suite and everything. It was great, but we're all in separate rooms. Nobody can be together. And so we're in the bubble season. We pitched our show, and at that time, we were getting ready to go on the show. Once again, going back to like, hey, how do we expand? How do we like grow? How do we figure out we want to transition? We're like, man, we have this seasoning, but we've watched this show. We know how these like sharks think, right? This is not going to be enough to like sell them on like we have a maturing business that's going to grow and elevate into something that could be big. And so like we need a new product. We need something else that's going to like be a good sell on this. And we're like, okay, we're already in this like vegan space. We already have a chicken salt seasoning. At that time, we had actually had a meeting with Beyond Meats. We were trying to find a way to help them bring their line of chicken back, right? And we were pitching on how they can use our product as substitute chicken boing because it really gives that kind of rich chicken flavor. And that didn't really materialize. But then we're like, we should just create our own chicken. Like, why not? And so we went into R&D and we developed this chicken substitute. It's basically you just add water and oil to our crumble mix, and you can shape it into any chicken substitute that you want. You could shape it into patties, you could shape it into nuggets, you could use it as a ground mix, right? And it's a shelf-stable mix. And we're like, yes, that's going to be like our high turnover product. That's going to be the sell, and the seasoning is going to like just be complementary to that. And so we got it done literally just in time, right before the show. Like the sharks were literally some of the first people to actually taste our product. So we're like, man, this is either going to work or it's not. It's going to be terrible, or this is going to blow them out the water. And luckily we got a deal from Barbara. And that was in end of 2020. And so since then, we've been scaling and growing the business, doing well. We're like focused really right now on e-commerce. We got into distribution like nationwide. We're in Sprouts, Whole Foods, but lots of ups and downs, crazy stuff within the food business. We found that e-commerce is really our bread and butter. So we've been kind of scaling back on the distribution side of stuff for retail. We do a lot of stuff for restaurants. So we have a lot of like food trucks, different places that purchase our product in bulk. But we mostly sell on Amazon and our website, and the business has been going great. We're still kind of slowly scaling, kind of at our pace. Still a small team, so we're fully hands-on day to day. But for me, it's just been another like crazy adventure that it was something that I didn't have any background and knowledge in. That I just kind of said, hey, what if? Let's see what can happen. And it's been great because even doing my STEM outreach work, I'm able to tie it into the business aspect of what I do with my hip hop science business and tie that into the food business, kind of showcase multiple different spectrums. And so for me, it's been a fun journey. And like I said, I'm always curious about learning new things, and who knows what this may develop into. Maybe we'll start a whole different line of products or go into a whole different direction altogether. But for me, it just falls along the lines of chasing the things that I love and finding what could happen and what opportunities might open up.
Wow, that's amazing. So my takeaway is show up for yourself, even if you have to stand in a 10-hour line for a minute pitch. And then I really took away that failure is just a shift in your path. It's not the end-all, be-all. So thank you. Oh,
I have a question. I don't know how we're doing on time, though.
we're kind of short on time, but we can talk in the hallway at the end. Yes, and so this is recorded, so this will be on the School of Engineering YouTube, and then Ricky will also send an email out, so you guys have this recording and everything. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.